"Ah, this memory is indelibly etched into my mind," exclaimed Ragnvald, recalling the momentous scene at the council in York. "I recall all too vividly the treacherous infiltrator who joined our ranks under false pretenses, only to be confronted by me in a brutal duel the next day. Our quarrel remains unresolved, but it may yet be settled in a final bitter clash. Take heart, fair lady. We shall find a way to thwart the schemes of the unscrupulous braggart Valdis. But if human efforts are in vain, I trust that a benevolent providence may grant a better fate for one so virtuous and fair. Let us hope for brighter days, even amidst these tumultuous times, for the tides of fate may swiftly turn. It is possible that the pains and animosities wrought by these cruel wars may be lessened, and the Saxons and Normans may find common ground in unity." "Is such a reconciliation even possible?" sighed the lady. "My people have become intoxicated by greed and bloodlust, while yours indulge in violent retribution." "Indeed, it appears that such a resolution is not yet within reach," admitted Ragnvald gravely. "Our commoners have suffered immense losses, with many driven to banditry and striking out against the Normans. Even among our leaders, there are those who have lost all and seek nothing but revenge, consumed by an unquenchable thirst for reconquest. But despite this, anyone who advocates for peace in the Saxon Witan in front of these unyielding men will be met with severe consequences." "Is there anything I can do to quell these hostilities?" asked the lady earnestly. "Your efforts have already yielded promising results," replied Ragnvald. "News of your deeds of kindness and compassion towards Saxons have spread throughout the land, softening many hardened hearts. Acts of mercy can do more to forge peace than all the weapons and force in the world." "But what of the underlying issue of this racial divide?" pressed the lady. "Some of our people seem to believe that the only solution is through the complete obliteration of those who resist their subjugation." "That is the sad truth, but a dangerous and doomed one," said Ragnvald solemnly. "There can be no victory in a conflict that ultimately leads to the destruction of one group or the other. It is only through mutual respect and understanding, and the recognition of our shared humanity, that lasting peace can be achieved. But until that day comes, the struggles and sufferings of our people will continue to echo throughout the ages." Inherent in a policy of coercion lies one inescapable conclusion. Were you to take that tree sapling and bind its crown to the earth, it would vigorously resist such a dishonorable yoke. And why? Because the Almighty designed it to be free, to flourish high above the ground, in harmony with its peers. The individual soul cherishes its liberty even more passionately than that sapling, and its rebellion against tyranny is perpetual. Force might smother it, but it would take persistent force to keep it subdued. Listen well, lady. It is simpler to speak of destruction than to carry it out. For the time being, I lead a group of men who are the finest of my kinfolk for courage, who will challenge your nation with impunity, and who can deal savage blows of vengeance in any unguarded moment. If ever your people are weakened, the retaliation will be fierce if no one restrains the untamed spirits. This infamy that rages between our populations is madness. How can we put an end to it?" said Elfrida. "I must admit, lady, that only a brief time ago my heart felt nothing but everlasting animosity toward your people. Nevertheless, as I lay in that cell beneath your castle, an angel disguised in human form granted me freedom and life out of pure mercy. It was extraordinary. With a single act, the frigid, stagnant blood in my veins became warm. I discerned that an ardor burns in the human heart more potent than hate, and that there are promises more binding than an oath. Let those who have no appetite for discord but always seek compassion labor to obtain mercy and reconciliation, and I can visualize an era when both cultures will unite in a manner that will make each stronger. I too long for that day, Sir Knight. But should we not retrace our steps? Mireille, I fear, will be distraught, suggested Elfrida. I am not a knight, lady. We Saxons are unhurried to learn the language of chivalry. If I may, call me Ragnvald. It will bring us closer together. Then if you are not skilled in the customs of chivalry, you will be more inclined to refer to me as Elfrida. Do we have an agreement? With my sincerest regards, Elfrida. This is a compact that assures you and your attendants' safety wherever you may go within my domain. "There is only one thing that I must warn you about," he chuckled. "One of my loyal Saxon followers has a great appreciation for the very same locations you might choose, and should he detect any affection in your gaze, you'll never find peace again." Your tone sounds like that of our Norman chivalrous companions. Nevertheless, if you're truly desperate for comfort, a bite shall suffice. Our Norman verse declares that the loyal knight shall do and suffer for his lady's love, without beginning to describe the deeds. Really quite astounding what the brave knights will attempt in the name of love and chivalry in books. I have contemplated such valiant knights in literature. Alas, of late my experience shows that they are more devoted to drinking and indulgence. So, Sir Knight, that is, at this moment I recall, whoever wins Elfrida Hofsos shall possess more noble character than that. I will not brag about my accomplishments such as the hypocrites do, so no more of that. Only time can tell the true nature of a man. But did I ever tell you how I managed to escape the castle that fateful night? I am extremely eager to hear it. Please tell me. It is a tale for another time, perhaps, but do know, there is no castle I cannot enter if desired. If you ever wish to converse with me, signal me from the tower, and we'll rendezvous there at nightfall whenever suits you. But is it safe for you to visit me there? Absolutely. It is completely safe. Then that is where we shall connect, and where I shall summon my Saxon friend on blissful occasions, but I believe more likely when my heart is melancholy, though I fear tremendously for your safety there. Is there nowhere else we can meet? Have courage, my dear. You needn't worry for me. Let your heart remain strong, for a bright future awaits us. As the boat navigated a bend in the waterway, Ragnvald witnessed the intense combat brewing between two Englishmen. With a pained exclamation, he vigorously rowed the vessel through closely planted trees along the bank. Once ashore, he liberated Bjarni from beating Gorma to the ground. "Jarl," he addressed, "what is the meaning of this? You are warring upon your own allies. This will not stand." "And what about this?" spat back Bjarni, his temper rising. "You and this spineless servant cozying up to our lethal foes, that won't suffice." "Enough, enough," Ragnvald soothed, collecting the unconscious body of Mireille. He placed her inside the boat and violently dashed water over her face. "There now," he said. "She's all right." In a hushed whisper he advised Elfrida, "Keep calm and continue our planned appointment. This man is from unruly Viking stock residing here. I'll be able to handle him." Ragnvald watched the boat and its occupants glide away as he waved a final farewell. He pivoted to his party, saying, "Let's go. Bjarni, this animosity will not end well for the English. Are harmonious relations with Norman women beneficial to their cause? I know that Vikings, Danes, or ancient Saxons didn't behave like this. Will we avenge defeats against our adversaries by pursuing their women? My forebears triumphed with swords, and I'll thrust my sword through any Norman or their women. I won't tolerate warding off the she-bear to protect her cubs." "Bjarni," Ragnvald pronounced firmly, "your ferocious, irreconcilable mood will hinder the English more than your swords help. Please recognize that I hold sway here, and my rules must apply. If you find my decision unacceptable, you should return to your estate at Lakesland and wage war on your own terms. If you do better than our own methods, then maybe we'll follow your example. However, we're not going to kill vulnerable women and children here. In particular, these two saved my life. Anyone harming them will become my mortal enemy. That's all, Jarl." Fie, admirable, no doubt, but I'm not fond of such styles of warfare. If I'm not permitted to spill Norman blood at every opportunity, then I will have none of it. I have my own strategies for safeguarding my people and for improving their lives, and I believe it is the most prudent. Regarding your techniques and aspirations of removing the Normans, I consider them to be more foolish than insanity, and ultimately lead to the obliteration of the Saxon lineage. Therefore, kindly refrain from further meddling in my designs," Ragnvald declared. Chapter 20. War's Vicissitudes. Hope. A simple word that tells a flattering tale, delusive, vain, and hollow. Ah, let not hope prevail, lest disappointment follow. In the aftermath of the desperate repulse that the Normans received at the hands of the Saxon outlaws, they became exceedingly chary of attempting the extermination of them once again, affording a welcome respite to the fugitives, particularly the women and children. However, the vigilance of their sentinels was never permitted to be relaxed. The retreat to which Erica had been conveyed was thus free from alarms, and lacked nothing in picturesqueness and beauty. Ragnvald had taken care that it should be furnished with some comfort and taste, for he had been wont in the summer-time to spend often many days and even weeks in this secluded and lovely spot. This home in the mountains was dearly welcome to Erica. During the day, she busied herself with the books of history, travel, and romance, which Ragnvald loved. Her face brightened at his cheery words and pleasant greetings. But for some days, a strange feeling of anxiety and foreboding had clouded her happiness. For more than a week, Ragnvald had not so much as paid a hurried visit to his favourite rendezvous. When her anxiety for tidings could no longer be resisted, Erica asked Bertwulf, "Your master has not been here for more than a week. Do you know what detains him? I fear me he has fallen into the hands of the Normans." "He will not fall into the hands of the Normans so easily, lady. If he does, it will only be his body, though I am afraid he ventures on some desperate enterprises." "Where has he gone, Bertwulf? Do you know?" "I know not for certainty, lady, but I believe he has gone with one Bjarni, Lord of Lakesland, for he has disappeared and taken his wildcat crew with him. Good riddance, and may my eyes never look upon such starved, ill-clad, unsavoury mortals again," Bertwulf replied. "Who is this Bjarni you speak of, Bertwulf?" "He is the Lord of the Lakes, but has had served out to him the same treatment as every other Saxon chieftain has had. First wholesale butchery of his followers, then death or flight and exile for himself." "What has he been doing here, then?" "He had been hunted, harassed, and driven from one hiding place to another, until he had but a handful of followers left. Then he sought respite in flight, and has been for a little while with us here, he and a dozen of his housecarls. Now he hears the Norman army has gone south, so he would like to return to the fray, and has requested the assistance of the Earl and a dozen stout retainers in return for the services he rendered us. Last night I had a dream, Bertwulf. I saw Ragnvald fighting desperately with Norman foes, and then he was surrounded by them and sorely wounded. Then I saw him carried by rough hands to a cave in the mountainside, and I saw him quickly bleeding to death, and no one there knew how to stop his wounds or cool his feverish brow. And I heard him cry, 'Erica!' And as I stretched out my hands to help, I awoke. It was but a dream, lady. Don't let your mind run on such things as these. You're looking pale and ill. My master will be angry when he comes back if he knows I told you of his plan. Can't we go tonight? I don't want to spend my time in idleness and ease while he risks danger and death for his country. We can reach Lakesland before the sun rises, and I'm confident I can be of help. Curse me if I dare move a stone's throw from this spot until he gives the order. I don't like laying here in idleness like the Earl's old swords hung there, but I'd rather not face him after disobeying orders. But he might be wounded, and there may not be anyone nearby to heal him except these rough men, while I'm worse than useless here, with nothing to do but burden others. Put your fears to rest, lady. These rough men know how to fix broken bones or close wounds, like any experienced doctor. But if you allow your mind to think incessantly about these things, you'll be miserable. I have no doubt about him. The Normans will find their match and give him a wide berth. I've seen them strike down regular people like myself with vigorous strokes, and strike awkward blows at him, through sheer terror at his appearance. They're outnumbered and outgunned, likely to be overpowered by the sheer force of their enemy. I could offer my services, and wouldn't mind being close to the action despite the harsh conditions. Arrange for a pair of horses to be saddled tonight. I fear the Earl would be quite displeased if he caught wind of such an arrangement, but perhaps those are idle concerns. Before I forget, I bring you a message from Abbot Adhelm. Well, I suppose he's no longer an abbot, but a humble friar without any power in his own abbey. Nonetheless, he was a most deserving man who never turned away a soul in need. Unfortunately, these Normans have brought along with them their own batch of lazy monks who spend more time drinking than praying. They even drink the ale intended for the hungry and destitute. I wish I could rid the church of these lackadaisical parasites, and though my prayers alone may not accomplish much, I'd do it gladly. But you mentioned a message from Adhelm, correct, Bertwulf? Indeed, indeed. My tongue has a mind of its own, much like my hound chasing after game.
Sometimes it just can't be reined in. Adhelm has managed to gain some sympathizers in the wolf's den. Who would have thought a she-wolf could have pity for the sheep? I'm afraid I haven't the slightest idea what you're talking about, Wolfe. Well, it's as pointless as a donkey's braying, but let me try to steer it towards a conclusion. This fiery Norman count has a daughter who's nothing like him at all.
Indeed, it is true enough that she denies her own father. I take the liberty to wander amongst those who have submitted to these foreigners, to see if there may be any encouragement to dine at the same table as these broken-spirited cattle. However, an iron collar around my neck is not an accessory I desire, and the kicks and blows have always left their mark on both my flesh and my mind. Thus I will not become a Norman serf. Yet I have heard that this count has a daughter who shows compassion by visiting and bringing delicacies to those who are unwell. Adhelm also says he is great friends with her, and she frequently engages in such work. This conversation was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door, and the quick entrance of one of the Earl's men. "Beowulf!" he exclaimed, but when he saw Erica, he suddenly paused. "I beg your pardon." He quickly removed his hat. "Urgent matters not requiring formalities have brought me." "What are they, my man?" Erica asked eagerly and anxiously. "The Earl is ill," the stranger replied, noting Beowulf's cautioning gesture. "I have ridden quickly to request a bed be prepared." "My dream! My dream!" Erica almost shrieked, rising from her chair. "He is not dead yet! Tell me he is not dead!" "Calm yourself, lady," Beowulf said, giving the stranger a meaningful look. "No, lady, just a mere scratch. A few weeks of your nursing will help him to recover as sound as a rock. But will you prepare, Beowulf? They are following close behind." Chapter 21. Viking Chief and Saxon Maiden. A vision of grandeur and awe-inspiring wonder flooded his mind, and he couldn't help but feel a profound adoration for the spectacle before him. The buzz of conversation and the scuffle of footsteps soon filled the air. Orders were given in hushed tones, accompanied by the sound of shuffling feet carrying a heavy load, followed by a deep groan. Erica was on high alert, her every nerve poised and ready for whatever was to come. The sounds eventually faded away as the group moved on, shutting doors behind them. After some time, Beowulf and his wife arrived, accompanied by Bjarni, the Lord of Lakesland. The sight of the burly stranger sent shivers down Erica's spine, and she did her best to evade his gaze as he stared her down. "I fear that the Earl's condition is worse than the messenger let on, Beowulf. May I visit him? I have some experience in nursing and may be of some assistance, given the circumstances of our troubled land." "Do not be alarmed," Bjarni replied, trying to soften the rough edges of his voice. "Ragnvald is resting now, and his wound is insignificant. It should have healed on its own, but he has been coddled too much. His wound has festered and caused a fever. It is a pity that men like him indulge in luxuries and frivolities such as these." He gestured towards the books and instruments. "Women's things and children's toys." Erica was far from reassured by his blunt words. "Perhaps I should accompany you." This was exactly what Eadberg wanted to hear, and the two women disappeared from sight. "Please, my lord, take a seat," Beowulf offered. "I will find something to eat. You must be famished after 8 hours of riding in the dark." I am," Bjarni replied. "We are indeed famished." As soon as Beowulf left the room, Bjarni couldn't contain his surprise at the sight he had just witnessed. He studied her with wonder. Was she an inhabitant of Valhalla, a place where the Norse gods and heroes found eternal rest? Even the priests never spoke of anyone as fair as she. He longed for a hero's death, to be united with her and the darkness beyond. Allow me to provide some context for my reader. Bjarni, or the Lord of Lakesland, was a typical Norse chieftain, still living in the ways of the past. He is a crucial player in these chronicles and deserves a proper introduction. Though he commanded attention, his presence often elicited a sense of discomfort or fear. When the Viking Halfdane invaded Northumbria, he gave lands to his followers. These groups intermarried over time, but some regions remained distinct. Bjarni was a descendant of Rollo the Ganger, renowned for his size and strength.
Legend claims that he had to walk because no horse could support his weight. Bjarni inherited his ancestors' physique and lacked refinement in his behavior and interests. Yet he upheld the virtues of honesty and chastity typical of the Vikings. Meanwhile, Saxon leaders like Ragnvald and Erika valued education to some degree. During the lifetime of King Edward, the Normans had contact with England and made changes to the crude habits and tastes of the people. However, Bjarni, a Norseman, embodied the uncompromising primitiveness of a raider untainted by the world's progress. He never left the rugged hills and eerie gorges of his domain, except to meet the hardy robbers from over the Scottish border. His pleasure came from fishing in glorious lakes, hunting in stretching forests and dense woods, and excelling in the crude games of wrestling, archery, putting the stone, and many other games which constituted the sole entertainments of the vulgar churls. He had minimal sympathy and interaction with those who were awakening to the presence of and yielding to the civilizing influences beginning to be felt in England due to increasing contact with the continent of Europe. Nonetheless, this man had a rugged honesty altogether admirable, great energy coupled with force of character. He loved deeply and faithfully, but he hated just as fiercely and implacably. Happy was the man who shared his affection. Woe to the man who incurred his hatred. Erika's first encounter with him had a distinctly repellent influence on her. His ardent gaze made her blood freeze in terror. She felt as though she was standing before one of the unlovable gods or heroes that their sages, or wise men, never tire of glorifying. Eirik's anxiety regarding Ragnvald might have intensified the sense of shrinking and dread the encounter brought about. Bjarni didn't miss the involuntary start and shrinking away from him, and it cut him deeply and to the quick. When the door closed behind Erika, Bjarni stood for several minutes like one petrified, staring blankly at the closed door through which the beautiful Saxon had left. The form and features of Eirika floated indistinctly before his vision. "She shrank from me!" he fiercely cried out with half a groan. "Why this ill-disguised dread of me?" he murmured. He slowly scrutinized himself from head to foot in a futile attempt to discover what it was about him that so startled and repelled Erika. With a determined stride, he approached the mirror which hung on the wall. It was an object he had never before utilized, and his initial disdain was clear upon his countenance. The reflection before him displayed his head and face, as well as the mass of his muscular frame. His skin was bronzed and brown, his unshaven and unkempt beard a jarring contrast to the masses of unkempt red hair that spilled from beneath his helmet. The thought occurred to him that he might better succeed in finding a mate by following the example of his Viking ancestors, who had won their brides with their swords, in war or in single combat. It seemed that in these degenerate days any unremarkable Norman knight or simple Saxon scholar could easily outpace him in the race for a bride. He reflected on the fact that his ancestors would have valued his sturdy frame more highly, but in modern times such qualities were dismissed as coarse and uncivilized. He could not fathom why the fair Saxon maiden who had caught his fancy seemed to recoil from him. He questioned what there was about her that had so bewitched him, and why he was becoming so enamored of her blue eyes and sylph-like form. He resolved that his bride should be of brawny build and hardy enough to consort with a sea king. She would be the one to bear him warrior sons. As he spoke to himself, he realized that his home would have to be the rugged hills where eagles nested, or the dense forest where wolves prowled and where red deer roamed freely. Yet, despite his resolve, he concluded with a pang of weakness that the comeliness of the fair Saxon seemed quite new to him, despite how he despised such maudlin sentiment. The stout and bold maidens with manly features never lured my affections. It has always been the gentle and delicate Saxon women who have captured my heart. Her soft speech and coy demeanor have won me over. Yet I curse myself for becoming so foolishly enamored. I will not tolerate such weakness. I will retreat to the moors to regain my Viking spirit and purge this foolish affection. I cannot mate with a timid dove unless I shed my talons. I refuse to become a plump, lazy Viking, unworthy of entering Valhalla, Bjarni said to himself. Meanwhile, Erika and his companions visit Ragnvald, who is gravely ill. Fortunately, the Saxons have some knowledge of medicine and healing. Even the lowly serfs have some knowledge of herbal remedies and simple treatments. Ragnvald tries to reassure Erika that his condition is not so dire, but his flushed face and laboured breathing say otherwise.
Despite his best efforts to maintain a brave face, a groan escaped Ragnvald, and his face contorted in pain. "Bjorn Wolfe," he pleaded, "please undo these bandages. My arm swells and the tightness is unbearable, causing sickening pain."
Erika stepped forward, confidently and with skilled hands, gently removing the clumsy bandages. She carefully cleaned and washed the festering wound, working resolutely and without hesitation. Without faltering, she applied a salve and rebandaged the wound. Ragnvald submitted passively, his fatigue reminiscent of a tired child. "Ah, now I have a chance," he sighed in relief. Erika then applied her culinary skills, presenting Ragnvald with a succession of appetizing delicacies from the nearby lake, flock, or hunt. "If only we had caught the wound before the fever set in, I would have greater hope," Erika confided to Eadberg. But this hope was not to be, as Ragnvald grew increasingly restless over the next day, with occasional delirium. This rapidly escalated into a total relapse. Erika remained tirelessly by Ragnvald's side at all times, while either Bjorn or Germa watched over him. At the height of his fever, Ragnvald engaged in life-and-death struggles with his arch-nemesis Valdis. Then he was transported overseas with Elfrida Hofsos, a refugee in a foreign land. He relived the scene where Elfrida, alone with torch in hand, freed him from a dungeon beneath a castle and granted him freedom and life. At times he recoiled in horror as Erika tended to him, while other times he called out passionately for the fair Norman with dark eyes and raven tresses. Erika endured these outbursts with a heavy heart, tears sometimes falling unbidden as she gently cared for him. She often murmured to herself, wondering if there was anything else she could have done to prevent this tragedy.
"He does not send his thoughts my way. I, a mere Saxon girl, to be coddled and spoken gently to. Oh, if only he were harsh and forbidding like this stranger. But he is who he is, and I, a woman created by God, will bear this burden, as women so often must. And he will never know, but that will make it more bearable." Thus endured many laborious days and sleepless nights of the unyielding struggle for life and victory. The heavy-hearted, helpless onlookers could only pray and hope for a favorable outcome through divine intervention. Finally, the turning point emerged. Through the patient's remarkable constitution and recuperative faculties, paired with the unwavering care and devotion of the Saxon maiden, the mighty adversary was defeated and cast out. A gradual healing process ensued, slowly rebuilding the patient's strength through gradual recuperation. Chapter 22. A Viking's Love. Love is an emotion as powerful as death, and jealousy can be as ruthless as the grave. These are the words from the ancient text, the Song of Solomon. During Ragnvald's recuperation from his illness, he and Germa meticulously devised a plan for the fortress they had determined to construct. Every detail was carefully considered and elaborated. Meanwhile, messengers were dispatched to gather artisans and craftsmen from far and wide. Speedily, they dug foundations, and the outer walls began to encircle the summit, rising steadily due to the persistent and energetic labors of the Saxon refugees. Each person worked diligently, knowing that their very survival depended on the strength of the fortress they were constructing. Before the Normans were aware of what was transpiring, a rampart had been erected, which was soon to develop into a stronghold, impervious and secure against attack. Attention shifted to the interior of the fortress, with wells being dug and stables built. Habitations sprang up as if by magic. Women and children arrived, carrying everything they had saved from past destruction. Cattle were driven in at night and emerged in the morning to feed around the fortress, where there were always bands of outlaws lurking in the woods. They snared game and cut timber for their bows and arrows. The Normans proved no match for these skilled outlaws in the woodlands. The hillmen became semi-friends with the Saxons, courting relationships with them all while becoming a tacit threat to the Norman regime. Hofsos feared the growth of this new rebel faction, as it threatened his own position of power. He recalled vividly the burning words of Ragnvald when he confronted him in his own home and asserted his right to pasturage and freedom.
Hofsos also feared the wrath of William should he discover the truth about his subjects' connivance with the incipient rebellion, which could ultimately threaten the peace of the kingdom.
Between the pleas of his daughter Elfrida for peace with the harassed Saxons, and the harsh lesson they once taught him that they were an unyielding enemy on their home turf, time passed in uncertainty on how to face the challenge posed by a small group of desperate men who fought with such determination when confronted, but were otherwise non-aggressive and peace-loving while pursuing their daily peaceful activities. The Saxon encampment was a peculiar and varied assemblage, and only the wisdom, vigilance, and remarkable restraint of Ragnvald, coupled with his unmatched bravery and determination, could keep the undisciplined and heterogeneous group under control. A faction of desperate and bloodthirsty men was almost impossible to contain, blinded by their hatred of the Normans to the point where they abhorred and undermined any actions that might have been prudent or wise. Ragnvald's attempts to instill self-restraint in his followers and foster a friendly relationship with the enemy were unbearable for them. Bjarni was the undisputed leader of these followers, dense in their ignorance and superstitions, who embodied the barbarianism, pillage, and butchery that were the hallmarks of their Norse forefathers. They never grasped, as Ragnvald did, that their plan to seize the kingdom from the Normans through brute force was hopeless, and might succeed only if the Normans were engaged in conflict elsewhere. Instead, these heathens held on to their primitive religion, egged on by their grim old priest Olaf, who sometimes emerged from his cave in the adjacent valley, haunting the settlement like a hyena smelling blood, and with remarkable ease, stirring up the fierce passions of his followers to the point of open mutiny and rebellion. Ragnvald, taking a statesman's view, surveyed the situation. Yet blending these rival groups into his vision required his utmost sagacity, valor, and exertions, which threatened the peace of the encampment with perpetuity. The desperate complications intensified into a personal cause of enmity and hatred on Bjarni's part due to his fierce and strange love for the fair Saxon, Eirika. Despite attempting to ignore his infatuation with Eirika, his efforts were futile. She was a familiar figure in the colony, and he frequently interacted with her, becoming more entangled with each passing day. Just like an ordinary person, Bjarni's love was a quagmire, and the more he struggled to escape, the further he sank, with no hope of extrication. One day, Bjarni bluntly addressed Eirika, confessing that he had no skill in the art of love, and his manners were not suitable for a fair maiden like her. However, she had kindled feelings in his heart that he believed were dead, and no longer in place in those times. Bjarni hoped that, perhaps, Eirika's gentle influence could teach him to love the ways of peace. This confession was precisely the sentiment Eirika had been dreading, and her discomfort and heartbreak were evident. She replied that it was not an appropriate time for marriage, and she could not think of wedlock during these difficult times. Bjarni proposed taking her to the court of Malcolm of Scotland, where she would be safe, and if peace should come they could return to their own land. "My good sir, your request is ill-timed. These are not times for romance. With my homeland in ruins and my people scattered, I can spare no feelings but for them. Believe me, my love for my country is just as noble as yours. If we were to wed, it would not diminish our patriotism." "Please stop, my dear lord. You don't understand. I am not free to love." Bjarni jumped as if stung by venom. "Ah, I must be a fool not to have seen it. How could a woman be near him and not develop feelings? Eirika, be happy in your love, and may it come at the perfect moment." "My lord, I have no lover." Eirika quickly exited the room. Bjarni paced the room deep in thought. Memories of finding Ragnvald and Germa with 2 Norman women filled his mind, and their meaning hit him harder than before. Could it be, he wondered, that he is blind to such a treasure, and would seek an alliance with the Norman interloper? His rage grew, and he clenched his sword's hilt tight as if preparing for battle. "I will keep an eye on this matter, and if my suspicions are correct, I will no longer ally myself with him. But if my sword proves stronger than his, he will suffer a dire fate. For such deceit can only be expunged with blood." With this vow, he stormed outside, scouring the fortifications for Ragnvald. When he finally learned that Ragnvald and Germa had gone to the valley, he quickly set off, hoping to uncover the truth,
and instinctively headed towards the place where his anger had flared before.
Chapter 23. A villain demands his wages.
Oh, how fearful the night pilot! Danger looms in the deep. The Count, strolling along the rising hill before the castle, marvelled at the stunning views of the surrounding woods. Observing the structure of the castle, he began to strategically plan additional fortifications to enhance its impregnability, like the veteran soldier he was. As his thoughts consumed him, he caught sight of a figure in the distance. Baron Valdis, the intruder, appeared before him. "After all this time, when shall the promise made to me at York be fulfilled, Count? Lady Elfrida has had ample months of preparation, and now in due time our nuptials should be celebrated," said Baron Valdis. "What says the lady about this, Baron? If she is willing, there's no reason to delay. Nevertheless, as Elfrida's father, and wishing her felicity, I must express my concerns about your excessive drinking habits," replied the Count, his expression changing from content to vexation. "Count, I thank you for your concern, but to the point, I have no thought that the lady's agreement was a part of our arrangement. Soldiers usually avoid traditional ceremonies, and with your consent, we shall proceed regardless of her ladyship's desires or whims. It was, if I remember correctly, a part of the payment for rendered services. Yet as a knight and soldier, you must profess gallantry, and forcing a lady's hand is not acceptable. You have countless opportunities to win her heart the right way, and that is my wish. What more could you expect of me as her father?" questioned the Count. "Your words are inspiring, but I must remind you that I do not possess the qualities of a fawning lover, nor do I serenade beneath my lady's window," replied Baron Valdis nonchalantly.
He continued, "I am a soldier, an unpolished one perhaps. Elfrida, on the other hand, has been thoroughly spoiled by the teachings of nuns and life in a convent. Her head is filled with their romantic and religious notions, something I find utterly absurd. My rough-and-tumble life doesn't make me the ideal candidate for playing the role of an insincere gentleman or spouting ridiculous religious lies. No, thank you. I can't force my daughter into this marriage, Baron. If you can win her heart, then so be it," demanded the Count sternly. "A deal is a deal. I won't be so easily fooled by a display of false virtue. I am well aware of your past indiscretions. If this arrangement isn't settled soon, I'll have no choice but to go straight to the king and report your foul conspiracy. And soon enough, I'll enjoy watching your head swing from the gallows. Then your prideful daughter will regret ever brushing me off so disdainfully." "You cowardly villain!" cried the Count. "Meet me in the glade and we'll settle this with swords." "Not so fast, good sir. I reserve my steel for more important battles. All I want is your daughter and your word that this marriage will take place. Let's not waste any more time with this trifling matter. Act now, or suffer the consequences." And without another word, the Baron stalked off, leaving the Count incensed and terrified. Later that evening, he sat down with Elfrida and spoke frankly. "Elfrida, I promised your hand to Baron Valdis some time ago, and now he's demanding that promise be kept. He's become very displeased and makes threats. You must marry him. That's the only solution." "I can't say I'm pleased with that idea, Father. From what I know of him, I have a poor opinion of the Baron. His attitude since the war began has grown increasingly boorish, and his drinking habits are alarming. If you're intent on finding me a husband, at least allow me to choose my own. Or better yet, I'd be happy to stay here with you." "My dear Elfrida," her father began, "I have already betrothed you to Valdis, and my honor requires that you honor this debt. Valdis, though no different from the other men in these turbulent times, is a renowned warrior, and his prowess is known throughout the land. Tell me, what more could you possibly desire in a husband?"
"Father," Elfrida replied, "I cannot imagine spending my life with someone I abhor. If it is necessary, I would rather retire to a convent than marry one so callous and devoid of basic human feeling. I ask you, please release me from this obligation." "Elfrida," her father replied sternly, "I will not allow you to retire to a convent or disobey me. These romantic and fanciful notions cannot be tolerated. We were betrothed without our consent, and this marriage must take place in 3 months. That is final." Heartbroken and despondent, Elfrida retreated to her room, weeping with despair. "What am I to do?" she cried to Mireille. "I cannot marry Valdis. I would rather be sleeping peacefully in the still pool beneath the hazel trees where we met the Saxon. Perhaps we should seek the advice of those Saxons we met before." Mireille hesitated for a moment before speaking. "My lady, perhaps we should seek the advice of the Saxon Gormer. I cannot deny that his thoughts have been on my mind ever since we met. Perhaps he can offer us a solution."
"We may encounter the Saxon knight again, dear Mireille. I had been led to believe that these Saxon chieftains were rude and coarse, but I discovered otherwise. Yes, my lady, the other chieftain who accompanied me was quite charming and presentable. They have also constructed a fortress in the mountains. He proposed that I become his wife, but I was hesitant since I believed that we would have to roam the woods and sleep in caverns. Now that they have a fortress in which to reside, I would consider becoming his wife if you were to elope with the other chieftain." Despite Mireille's willingness to place her trust in Gormer, Elfrida found herself smiling. The following day, they embarked on a journey to the river, where they utilized a boat to paddle up the stream. "Do you believe we shall happen upon the Saxon knight, Mireille? If he should appear, his companion will undoubtedly be with him. Don't you believe so?" "Mireille, I believe you have fallen in love with that towering Saxon bondman." "He is not anyone's bondman, my lady. He divulged to me that he is a Saxon freeman." "A freeman, Mireille? And what does that entail, pray tell?" "I believe that a freeman is somewhat akin to a knight, at least in terms of holding his own lands." "Ah, I see. Well, we will arrive at the same landing spot soon. Shall we disembark from the boat, Mireille?" "I would advise against it until we have become aware of their presence, my lady. What would we do if the fierce Saxon managed to apprehend us? The Saxon earl assured me that none of his people would harm us, Mireille. However, we must be cautious. We are now entirely obscured from view of the fortress. Let us paddle cautiously and keep watch." Graciously the ladies drifted under the boughs of the trees, causing the waterfowl to flee into the dense foliage, or submerge themselves before re-emerging on the opposite side. In the meantime, snipes and striking kingfishers skimmed over the water's surface into the wilderness ahead. "This is similar to a section of heaven," Elfrida remarked. "Indeed, it is lovely," Mireille agreed. "And that is the fallen tree where the Saxon and I sat together." "The Saxon's follower, not he, should be your focus," said Mireille. "But I do not believe him to be a mere follower, my lady. They may be equals, or he is only slightly lower in rank," replied the other. It goes without saying that since Ragnvald's recovery, the river was eagerly monitored by the two women for another chance encounter. The two strong men spotted the slender boat making its way upstream and hastened to meet them. When the women disembarked, there was less agitation than their previous encounter, but hearts still fluttered and blushes bloomed. Mireille clung to Gormer for support as the boat rocked beneath her. Meanwhile, Ragnvald and Elfrida strolled along the riverbank, sharing her story of impending doom. Despite the dire tidings, Ragnvald reassured her that all would be well. They spoke deeply and intimately, opening their hearts to each other. It was peculiar that this noblewoman would so readily surrender herself to this Saxon without reason or forethought. However, love's instinctual and unbridled force compelled her to give herself to him completely. The very same impulse that caused repugnance at the notion of interaction with the savage Norman impelled her forcibly towards the protective embrace of the noble-hearted and courageous Saxon. They arranged follow-up meetings, all the while ignorant of the fact that angry eyes, gleaming with hate, were observing them through the foliage, and intense animosity was festering in the heart of an unseen adversary, who could scarcely resist the urge to charge in and exact revenge in an instant. Chapter 24. The Tryst. The tolling of the curfew bell signals the end of another day. The herd of cattle slowly makes their way across the grassy plain. Weary from a long day's work, the ploughman trudges home, leaving the world to darkness and solitude. Grey. From the flagpole atop the castle tower, a pennant with long streamers can be seen fluttering in the afternoon breeze. Elfrida stands alone on the tower, gazing northward towards the ominous mountain range in the distance. With acute vision, she spots a dark shape against the blue sky. It is not a bird of prey, but a person. With a cry of astonishment, she exclaims, "He sees it! He will come tonight! Oh, how time drags as I wait for him to arrive!" She prays fervently to the saints, knowing that prayers are like curses, they bring a harvest to the sower. The slow hours pass, and the twilight fades into darkness. The thrushes retire for the night, bidding farewell to the luminous day. In the woods, Ragnvald stands rooted to the ground, his ears straining for a human voice or the sound of footsteps.
The night is still, with only the sounds of nature filling the air. The rustling of animals and insects, the fluttering of bats, and the sharp yelp of a fox in the distance. These sounds are not unsettling to Ragnvald. They are a comfort, a reminder that life goes on even as man rests. He gazes up at the tower, its outline clear against the starry sky. Suddenly, a figure appears on the battlements and waves something in the air. Ragnvald recognizes the signal and quickly climbs the tree to reach the underground passage. He emerges on the battlements and embraces Elfrida, who has brought him ill news. "Hush now, my darling. Your troubles do not add to my burdens, but instead give me strength to face any challenge. I will always champion your cause, even at the risk of my own life." Elfrida fears for Ragnvald's safety, but he is undeterred. He will stand up for her against any foe and face any danger with courage and determination.
"If it be so, my darling, you have granted unto me the very gift of life when that grim and inglorious demise awaited me. If I do fall whilst defending thy honour, then I do so willingly. Aye, nay, more than that. Nevertheless, let us not foster such musings, for I hold the belief that a merciful providence shall forever provide a boon to one such as you. Let our convictions be strong, and never waver in the face of uncertainty. My faith and hope are steadfast. Come, tell me what disturbance and trouble vexes your thoughts." As they settled together on a nearby slope, Elfrida snuggled near her noble champion and revealed the fresh difficulties besetting her. "My father showed great anger today, scolding me harshly for not planning our wedding celebrations and threatening to force a marriage with Valdis. Is he yet determined to press ahead with this odious and heathenish alliance? Yes, but judge him not unkindly, dearest. I am certain he loves me deeply, despite his severe conduct. I have witnessed on many occasions his frown and heard his bitter words at the presence of Valdis. Were it not for the oppressive hold he holds over my father, I should not be required to wed with him. However, Valdis demands my hand in exchange for peace. You still loathe this man and the idea of their marriage, dear Elfrida. Is that not so? My entire being revolts against him, and I would sooner suffer 100 deaths than to be his bride. But what my duty may entail for my father's sake I cannot say. And is it to be a price of peace that you are offered to this devil incarnate, whose hands are stained with blood shed against innocent men and women, and whose existence is one of coarse indulgences? The vision is ghastly, but what am I to do? In times like these, what options do I possess? Have faith, my love. There shall be no compulsion for you to submit, replied Ragnvald, unsheathing his sword. Here is a loyal friend which shall sever this vexing knot, should more diplomatic means fail. Valdis owes a debt 100 times over for the wicked deeds he has done, and continues to perform against my defenseless countrymen. The blade has hung over him for quite some time, and it will drop before he takes you as his bride. Even if he reaches the altar with you, he will not succeed in his nefarious plans. I will confront him there. You need not fear, because I will ensure he is defeated, even if it is the last strike of my reliable sword. If relief does not arrive in the interim, the matter will come to a close at the end. However, let us turn our thoughts to other matters. It appears that this situation is weighing heavily on you. I am happy to announce the fortification on the hill is progressing well. Unfortunately, I have some unfortunate news concerning this. That's why I asked you to come here tonight, Elfrida said. What's the matter, my love? Let everything that's troubling you be known. We're generally indifferent to anything that may happen. However, this may be a significant issue. The king is presently in York with a considerable army of soldiers and a few mercenaries, ready to quash any Saxon insurrection attempts. One of his envoys arrived here this morning, requesting information concerning your people's attitude.
My father is currently drafting a letter with all the details of your actions and requesting assistance in besieging your fortress and executing your rebellious followers. I'm afraid if William becomes tenacious, he will not stop until your stronghold falls, showing no mercy to those who defy him. This is grave news, and we must do everything in our power to prevent the message from reaching its destination. Do you know when the messenger will leave? My father mentioned the day after tomorrow. Here's a copy of the message, which I prepared at his request. Thank you kindly, my dear. We must devise a solution to confront this urgent matter. I believe I have an acquaintance who could outsmart the king's messenger through cunning or trickery. Time is of the essence, however. Bid me farewell with a kiss. Now, hurry off to bed, you skittish kitten, and may peaceful slumber embrace you in its soothing embrace. Farewell, farewell, for but a brief moment. Chapter 25. Skuggi cracks the Norman's pate. Those who intervene in arguments often suffer the consequences, as the mastiffs have learned. Several miles from the Norman stronghold at the castle, following the course of the river along a path that, while irregular, was sufficient for pedestrians and lightly travelled, a Norman messenger carrying a dispatch from Hofsos to the Conqueror proceeded toward his destination. He had walked briskly along a poor road, and his spring had begun to leave his stride. His belt held a sword, and a backpack containing food provisions and a small quiver of arrows hung over his shoulder. In his right hand he carried a quarterstaff which he used as a walking stick. The Normans favoured this weapon, which they had learned to use from the Saxons, and it had become a fixture in their rough games and amusements. It was singularly well suited to testing the physical strength and agility of its wielders, while its vigorous application typically resulted in only bruises and frayed tempers. Up ahead, lying in wait unnoticed by the Norman, there was a strange being carefully observing the path from atop a small hill overlooking a bend in the road. This creature's eccentric garb identified him as a child of the woods and the hunt, and he had an indescribable appearance. When the form of the Norman messenger rounded the corner into view, he sprang to his feet with remarkable grace. He stepped out into the path and pretended to travel in the stranger's direction, though the Norman had not yet seen him. As he went slowly trudging along, he burst into a cheerful tune, singing heartily. His doggerel's refrain went something like this. My ballad is of a brave pilgrim who strode nimbly over the field. A monkish deer approached him and said, What news have you, my friend?
The problem at hand is a scarcity of wine and venison, as noted by the Normans. This matter is not to be taken lightly, for it affects the basic needs of society. To make matters worse, the Normans blame those who indulge in these delicacies excessively. The solution to this problem is to be found in a drinking sack, a type of wine which is stored by the Normans. The singer, who appears to be oblivious to his surroundings, takes on a lively tune as he twirls his quarterstaff. Yet when approached by the Norman, he is startled. The Norman addresses him in a rude and sarcastic manner, but the singer remains polite. He explains that he is happy because life is too short to be sad, and that he possesses a good collection of food and drink which he intends to enjoy while he can. When accused of heavy drinking, the singer denies it, but admits that he drinks when he is thirsty. Do you crave hydration? And how frequently does that sensation arise? Not a week goes by, I will wager, the Norman said. Admittedly, I am often afflicted with a parched sensation in the pit of my stomach when wine or ale is present, and I have observed this occurrence many times. Good wine appears to target the exact spot. It is a very soothing remedy if consistently utilized and imbibed regularly to maintain moistness in my gut. Well, I believe you should offer a sampling of your wine to a parched colleague, my friend. It is a minor request. The stranger, suddenly alert, answered, Not so fast, my bold friend. Don't act impulsively before thinking. First, pay your clergyman, then confess your sins. How can I determine whether or not you are a friend? Understand, to give fine wine to an undesirable gossip is to waste exceptional liquor, and there isn't a sin more heinous in any calendar than wasting good liquor. Nay, it would be a mortal sin. Aha, since you are a man of everything. Did you know, old man, that when a donkey kicks his legs he inquires about the cudgel? Come now, let's say I joyfully attack your parched bones and take your bottle as well as flay your skin, what then? Easy there, my valiant ally, retorted the stranger, spinning his cane.
I confess I will whack you so hard with my cane it would mix your brain like a cocktail if you dared to take my bottle. Although it would be a danger to flatten any more of you above your shoulders, since, truth be told, you would be welcomed only in places where flatness is desired. I realize you are brave enough when feeling cornered and impudent. But I can quell your audacity, my small rooster, quite easily, the Norman haughtily boasted. That may be true, or it may be irrelevant. But let me warn you, just in case, that my cane is sturdier than your head. Therefore, as a friend, I advise you to avoid taking unnecessary risks. Risks? Chuckled the bold man. And from a bloated coward such as yourself? I don't think so. Very well, then, said the Saxon, unstrapping his wallet and laying it upon the ground. Since you will not be advised, take your staff for a friendly bout. If I crack your pate, you shall have half my wine. And marry, if you crack mine, you shall have the whole, for I love a bout with the staff almost as well as I like Flemish wine. The Norman, proud of his prowess with the staff and a span taller than the Saxon, readily accepted the challenge. As the pair were toe-to-toe, dealing blow for blow, the Saxon appeared at a disadvantage. He frequently received slight blows, at which the Norman was visibly elated. The Saxon seemed to shrink from the onset, but a sly humour lurking about his wicked grey eye was very ominous. Eventually, taking a mild blow from his foe, the Saxon put a giant strength into his arm, and like a thunderbolt his staff came down with a crash upon the Norman's skull, cutting it open and knocking him senseless on the ground. "Poor fellow," said Scuggy, for it was he. "You don't know how sorry I feel to have to give you a crack like this, but less would hardly do the business." Scuggy quickly undid the Norman's doublet and took a sealed message from Hofsos out of an inside pocket, then deposited a similar one in its place. He steeped a cloth in the river and gently bathed the Norman's head, staunching the bleeding and carefully drawing the hair over it to hide the wound as much as possible. Scuggy poured some of the Flemish wine he carried down the Norman's throat. The Norman slowly opened his eyes and stared about him with a dazed, unmeaning look.
"Very well, my brave friend," spoke Scuggy in a hearty tone. "Allow me to offer you another sip from my flask." The Norman eagerly obliged, taking a generous gulp that seemed to reinvigorate him. Slowly but surely, the events of the altercation began to come back to him, and he instinctively reached up to touch the injury on his head. "You scoundrel!" he exclaimed. "You've given me quite the knock on the noggin." "Nonsense, my friend," Scuggy retorted with a laugh. "Your skull is strong as an ox. You've just got a little bit of a cut, nothing more. A few days' rest and you'll be as right as rain." "I highly doubt that, and I don't think a week or two will do the trick either. I'm quite convinced that you were looking to brain me." "On the contrary, my dear sir. If I'd wanted to do harm, why haven't I already? You were vulnerable and defenseless while you were laying there. Truth is, you gave me a good thrashing yourself. I'll be feeling it for some time. It was my first time ever to lay a hand on you, and you were so eager to strike me that you left yourself open. You had me on the ropes for quite some time." With each word, Scuggy skillfully stroked the Norman's ego and offered him more of his wine, and soon enough the two were on jolly terms, even parting with warm regards. Scuggy couldn't help but chuckle to himself as he made his way towards the hills by a shortcut. Meanwhile, Ragnvald anxiously held his position at the agreed-upon spot, hoping that Scuggy would succeed in his task. He was well aware that should anything go wrong, Scuggy was prepared to use force if necessary. Failure to intercept the message would spell disaster for the Saxon colony on the hill. Thankfully, Ragnvald was met with relief as his friend approached with a triumphant grin. "Scuggy, good to see you. How did it go? No issues, I hope?" Scuggy simply handed the parchment to Ragnvald, declining to speak. Without hesitation, Ragnvald ripped open the parchment and scanned over its contents. "Very well, Scuggy. Pray elucidate as to how you acquired this parcel. Never once did the messenger suspect that it was in your possession." He was blissfully unaware, sir. Upon verifying the safety of his delivery, he departed with confidence in his stride. "Indeed, Scuggy, your slyness knows no bounds. But pray tell, what does this note contain, and how did you obtain it?" As the comrades continued their journey, Scuggy animatedly recounted how he had outsmarted the Norman messenger and sent him on his way with a fractured cranium. Such cunning deeds elated Ragnvald greatly.
Chapter 26. Saxon and Viking at the sword's point.
The great poet John Milton once wrote, "Who overcomes by force hath overcome but half his foe." These words ring true for Bjarni, who found himself consumed by hatred and contempt for Ragnvald after catching him once again with Elfrida Hofsos, the Saxon chieftain. Bjarni wasted no time in confronting Eirika, the leader of their people, about Ragnvald's treacherous behavior. With harsh words, he accused Ragnvald of engaging in illicit relations with the dark-eyed Norman woman and betraying his own people. But Eirika refused to listen to Bjarni's accusations. She believed that Ragnvald was the only possible leader who could rally their scattered and dispirited people. She saw him as sagacious and brave, and as a valiant defender of their country. She did not believe he was a renegade or traitor, despite Bjarni's claims. Bjarni could not understand how Eirika could defend Ragnvald's actions. How could he prostrate himself before the Norman woman without despising and betraying his own people? But Eirika saw things differently. She did not see the woman as a threat or enemy, but as someone kind and virtuous who had helped many in need. She believed that Ragnvald's love for her was understandable and forgivable. Bjarni could not accept Eirika's defense of Ragnvald and the Norman woman. In his eyes, they had stolen what rightfully belonged to Eirika and betrayed their people. But Eirika remained steadfast in her beliefs, refusing to let the hatred and contempt of others guide her actions. In the end, only time would tell who was right and who was wrong. "Such words are a grave insult to me," exclaimed the Saxon maiden, her voice dripping with indignation. "I do not need to plead for a lover, my lord. I'll have you know that I am perfectly capable of choosing who I wish to love." Bjarni retorted, "You are simply delusional, my lady. Your infatuation with him has driven you to madness. But I will seek revenge on both of them, regardless of whether you endorse it or not." Rising to her full height, the Saxon maiden glared at him and exclaimed, "Who told you that I love him? Are you going to sing tales about me like a minstrel and broadcast them throughout the camp? I will not tolerate you assuming what I have not told you. Allow me to make myself clear, once and for all. A Saxon woman will love whoever she chooses and only who she chooses. Your references are shameful and degrading." With that, she abruptly left the room, her strength sapped. She collapsed on a chair the moment she closed the door. Eadberg, her attendant, rushed to her aid, exclaiming, "Oh, dearie me, what on earth is the matter? That uncouth fellow has been courting you again, I wager. He'll drive my mistress to madness if he doesn't leave her be. That great mountain of flesh would terrify anyone, especially a delicate flower like my mistress." Meanwhile, Bjarni, having been rejected yet again, fumed with anger. He stormed off in search of Ragnvald, who was overseeing a team of labourers. Ragnvald could see that he was in a state of intense agitation and seething with fury. "I need to have a word with you," Bjarni growled at Ragnvald as he passed by. Ragnvald trailed behind him, making sure they were out of earshot of others. "What is it that brings you here so fiercely this morning?" he asked, sensing that something serious was afoot. "I have come to expose a traitor, and make him repent or perish," Bjarni declared through gritted teeth. "If it's as dire as you appear to believe, then let us dispense with the formalities and get straight to the point," Ragnvald replied calmly. "My concern turns to you, for you are a renegade and a trickster, paying homage to a Norman woman and sacrificing your nation's cause and your people's liberties for the chance to garner a smile from a worthless Norman wench. Plain speaking for you, I suspect." "You speak falsely, Jarl, and once again your madness knows no bounds of restraint. Let it be known to you that I shall not tolerate any more outbursts from you, or any more gossip and contentious manipulation amongst my people. Take leave and scram back to your domain or anywhere else, as long as you stay out of my way. There you shall be free to behave as you wish without any restrictions." "How well you have spoken, indeed. Just as fluent as any sycophant at a Norman court. Truly, you have a gift. Save your eloquence for your lady-love. It has no impact on me. Know this, though. Putting some distance of honest Saxon land between us will not dissolve our differences. I won't attempt this unless other methods are unsuitable. There are no differences between us other than those born in your filthy brain, Jarl. What methods are those which you suggest to reconcile this rift I don't know.
but your eyes exhibit signs of lunacy, with which I'm familiar, and I suspect intentions of deadly mischief you are designing, if your ability to commit such wrongdoing doesn't fail you. The ire of Skuld should be unleashed upon you, traitor. You are correct, so defend yourself straight away, or I shall run you through without much hesitation as I would with a dog, said the Viking, writhing with his sword, and taking strides towards Ragnvald. While they hurled insults, the entire camp was thoroughly alert, and inquisitive eyes from every nook and cranny were nervously watching to see where this climactic brawl would lead. But when weapons were drawn, the farmers eagerly gathered around their respective chieftains in fervent overexcitement. Ragnvald would have preferred to settle the argument without resorting to violence, or if that wasn't an option, then he would have preferred it to happen outside the racket and partiality of the camp. However, Bjarni's uncontrolled frenzy eliminated any reasonable options. Forced into this appeal to the sword, he unsheathed his weapon. The two broadswords clashed in the grip of two powerful antagonists. Ragnvald remained cool, cognizant of the life-and-death struggle unfolding before him. He knew that yielding would mean losing supremacy in the camp. His opponent, Bjarni, meant it to be to the death. Ragnvald was not far behind Bjarni in sheer brute strength and force, but he was much more agile and skilled. He fought defensively, parrying Bjarni's thundering blows with masterly skill, steadily giving ground before his eager and impetuous onslaught. Ragnvald saw that vital exhaustion must follow quickly on the heels of such dire rage, and soon it became evident that the pace was telling upon his adversary. With one powerful blow, he sent Bjarni's weapon flying from his grasp. In a climax of senseless rage, Bjarni rushed on Ragnvald, in vain trying to close with him, but Ragnvald turned the flat of his sword, dealt him a powerful blow on the head with its broadside, and knocked him senseless and bleeding to the ground. He quickly rose to his feet again. "There," spoke Ragnvald, calmly sheathing his weapon. "Take your sword. I have given you your life. Be warned, and cross my path no more whilst you are in your present mood. For Saxon or no Saxon, there will be but one more passage at arms between me and you may fare worse at our next meeting. I offer you no gratitude for your mercy, nor do I lessen one bit of my loathing for you and your dalliances with Norman women, while your countrymen's blood demands retaliation. I advise you to be cautious, for good fortune may not be on your side next time we meet." With that, the angry foe hurried off. For a long time, Ragnvald remained with folded arms and bowed head, pacing to and fro on the sward, in worried and anxious thought. His words were spoken aloud. Too well I understand that foul threat, and well I grasped the untamed and ruthless nature of this foe in my own household. When our forefathers first entered this land, wild and daring, counting human life as worthless, none were more hostile and brutal in all the savage groups than he. But this is the question to be answered. Were those old days of savage customs and savage bravery the pinnacle days of our people? Our ancestors faced all dangers, and they were a victorious people. What are we now? Are we not pitifully crushed, a people with no freedom and no autonomy compared to a braver people? Is this lingering flag of our forebears in the right? What are books, music, and chivalry? What is this newfound desire for compassion, justice, and virtue? Is it simply a weakening breeze from the south, changing heroes into effeminate fantasizers and feeblings? What must I choose now? For I must make my choice at this moment. A Viking with barbaric inclinations and implacable, unceasing loathing of my adversaries, participating in savage slaughter and carefree massacre of helpless women and innocent children. Can I see eye to eye with this man? This question I must answer once and for all. In intense mental turmoil, he turned around. "No," he exclaimed, his voice filled with conviction. "It cannot be, no matter the cost. I cannot tolerate his barbarism. I hold disdain for his lack of knowledge and his uncivilized mannerisms. We possess diverging ideals and objectives. However, I owe my existence to this exceptional Norman. I am compelled to reciprocate the gesture in full. Furthermore," he continued, while his chest swelled with a strong ardor, "during my wakeful hours, her voice's charming melody elevates my soul, while her captivating gaze ignites my passion. In slumber, I converse with her, and my dreams manifest peaceful moments of gladness that await me. The course is set, and I shall tread it, even though it is precarious. The Normans are merciless adversaries, and the mad Norseman only augments the danger. I will follow the righteousness. The Almighty will intervene for me against this people he has entrusted me to guard.